senses and into your body, or that language is body. For Kojève, language isn't that, it's not that killer, so to speak. Still, he's onto something essential. Derrida and Benjamin, in another neighborhood altogether, paired up vitally to mark in what ways authority depends on its own representative and performative capacities, impatient to posit its field of determinations and earn the benefits of its own effectuation. The question arises of where to locate authority's domain, how to separate it off, or separate off its different functions and identify its wide-ranging conceptual alliances. Whereas Kant removed authority from persons and offices. So Kant says, I don't want people or their offices to hold authority, because that's abusive. Therefore, trouncing some of Luther's calculated maneuvers and rerouted, this is Kant, Kant rerouted authority to the law. Only law can hold and command authority. Derrida notes that law, in terms of the authority it wields, is not merely a docile instrument, servile and thus exterior to the dominant power, but instead something that can and does maintain a more internal, more complex relationship with what one calls force, power, or violence. Let's not forget that all the political theorists and theories that I mentioned said that you can't think of politics or power without confronting this elusive para-concept of authority. That's why we're working through it tonight, I think. Now, Lacoue-Labarthe, Nancy, and Sam Weber control other sectors of the authority problem and stress panic as a principal concern for political thought and the way it leads to self-authorizing acts and paternal layovers. The three meet over a reading of Moses and Monotheism, where Moses serves both as perpetual child and founding father, both as law-bearer and breaker of that which regulates social narcissism. Kojève, by the way, by next week you will be very fluent with all of these terms. Kojève, who does not want to see authority bleed into other qualities of statement or act, opposes authority to force and power, basing his observations on paternal paradigms that are spared deconstructive takedowns. In the introduction to the text, I'm thinking about the editor of François Terray writes when broaching this authority of the father, whether hidden or repressed, is something that he needs to make it clear that la psychanalyse est ici hors du champ de la réflexion. Psychoanalysis is off the table. Right at the moment when paternal authority makes its mark and is shown to be repressed. Though another likely scene of the slaying of the father, at least it's honest. Psychoanalysis has been tagged out as concerns a phenomenological approach to this authority of the father, and will not contribute to the formation of identity organized around group psychology. Will the spliced out discipline return to punish or unsettle the household of authority that Kojève sets out to establish? Doesn't psychoanalysis always come back to bite the ass of the phenomenological politology that thinks it can simply discard it? Such questions seem premature and have entered my initial sphere only to indicate how severely authority can replicate itself when under investigation. By this I mean that anyone who has written on authority makes authoritarian claims and performs authoritarian exclusionary operations. They go, we're open to the opposite of authoritarian or authority things, but this is out. No way I'm going to talk about this. I'm foreclosing this. So just note how that happens, even to the extent of disabling a friendly discourse such as psychoanalysis. Well, maybe not so friendly, nor merely discursive, because too close for comfort. Kojève, in any case, proves impatient with the genealogical and Oedipal tracks that psychoanalysis will have laid down, perhaps even with its exorbitant authority over political analyses in especially weighted theoretical settings. So Kojève decisively crowds them out. So do note how often and to what extent Freud is begrudgingly considered a political theorist, or to what extent his theories are either smuggled aboard or at some level of discursive consciousness marked as essential for thinking of our relatedness as political beings. The one thing I would have liked to see the severed pair get together on, and here the allied tendencies of political philosophy and psychoanalysis would have encouraged us to no end, involves new itineraries of pleasure and politics in conjunction with a relentless aestheticization of the political, a historical tendency that both psychoanalysis and Kojève have exposed, if not ripped apart. So even though he mutes the psychoanalytic program, Kojève relies on the draw of desire. You may say it's Hegelian, I say it's psychoanalysis. And then, depending on the intellectual climate, may whip out a "what's the difference nowadays" lecture. In order to push forward with his political analysis. So this is what Kojève is doing. He mutes the psychoanalytic program. He nonetheless insinuates desire into the actualization of justice. This is the part that Judith Butler wants us to go over together, where you'll see what's going on here. Or if not, you'll ask me afterwards. So Kojève's work brings to light the pleasure of judging. This is what I'd like us to focus on tonight, because I think that this complicates all sorts of political and perhaps even philosophical itineraries that are concerned with justice and judging. So his work does bring to light the pleasure of judging, a pleasure as acute and specifically rendered as sexual and aesthetic pleasures. So judging turns you on, which is why everyone's judging everyone. You have to be pretty zen to stop judging already, you know? So the human psyche is invested in and inspired by the idea of justice and is outfitted with a properly juridical interestedness, which is as personal as it is intense. So everyone is into justice in a kind of interested way. This is addressing Kant's disinterested pleasure. And that's why I'll venture spontaneously, television offers up so many juridical dramas to prime and parasite the personal investment in law, the delight in representations of juridical eventfulness. I try to pursue that elsewhere. Why does television why is it obsessed with courtroom drama, trials, police? Why does television own the LAPD or the NYPD and so on and so forth? One would have to roll back to Kant to see how the recharging of desire works here in the sphere of judgment. Kojève puts the pleasure back in judgment, where Kant directed the explicit thrill of judging to the aesthetic domain, calming it down and hosing it down with disinterestedness, abolishing the privative in order properly to enliven judgment and to resurrect it. So this is what Kant explicitly says. He wants to enliven. Nowadays, if I were translating it, I'd say, I want to make judgment sexy. That's what he meant to say. I'm telling you. So to enliven judgment and to resurrect it from the numbing fields of the two prior critiques. Jump-started in the third critique, judgment comes to life, but within the limits of a safety zone secured by constant philosophical inspection. So he locks it up in a we'll talk about it. Following the prompts of an altogether